Dante Moretti never feared death, betrayal, or blood, only the ghost of the woman he let walk away. Tonight, in the sterile brightness of St. Helena Hospital, fate would drag him back to the one truth he'd spent years burying. He had no idea the crack in his golden empire had already begun to spread, thin as a hairline fracture, sharp enough to cut through the life he thought he controlled. Dante Moretti owned the night the way kings once owned kingdoms, with quiet brutality, unwavering authority, and the kind of devotion people offered only to saints or monsters. In Chicago, his name was both a blessing and a curse. Men whispered it in fear, women in longing, enemies in nightmares. It was a life carved from discipline, strategy, and the cold steel of pride. Pride had built him. Pride had kept him alive. Pride had cost him everything that once felt human. His penthouse overlooked the glittering city, a panorama of wealth and danger stitched together by neon veins. The glass walls reflected the man he had become. Immaculate suit, impossibly steady eyes, a presence that bent the world around him. But behind that polished image was the echo of a woman's laughter he could never erase. Elena. He tasted her name like a forbidden memory. 4 years since she walked out of his life. 4 years since he let her. 4 years since she stopped calling, and he pretended he didn't notice. Their marriage had been passion sharpened into a blade, too bright and too volatile to last. She wanted warmth. He was raised in fire. She wanted a home. He lived in a fortress built on secrets. When she left, she took the last soft part of him. He let her go because chasing her meant admitting he needed something he didn't know how to hold. Control was everything. Tonight, control slipped. The call came just after midnight, a routine update from one of his capos injured in a warehouse raid, a loose end to tie, a message to reinforce. Violence was business, and business needed attention. Dante descended from his tower, slipping into the back seat of his black Maserati, the engine's growl harmonizing with the storm brewing over the lake. From the hospital entrance, the world looked deceptively calm. White walls, tired nurses, the antiseptic smell of hope and despair mingled together. Dante walked with the effortless authority of a man who never asked permission. Heads turned. Some recognized him. Others simply sensed danger entering the room like a shift in air pressure. He didn't care. He cared even less when 2 small bodies collided with him. At first, he thought some frantic parent had lost control of their children. But then he felt the grip, tiny hands clutching his coat with desperate strength. 2 little girls, mirror images of each other with dark curls and tear-bright eyes, clung to him as though he were salvation instead of sin. "Please," one sobbed, voice cracking, "please help us." Dante froze. Children were foreign territory, fragile, unpredictable, unshielded from the world he navigated with ruthless precision. He lowered his gaze. The twins stared back with terror so raw it made the air tighten in his lungs. "What do you want?" His voice came out low, unfamiliar. "You have to save her," the bolder girl cried. "They said she might die." His jaw tightened. "Save who?" "Mommy," whispered the quieter twin. "Please, you're the only one." Something twisted in his chest. "Who is your mother?" "Elena Moretti." The name detonated inside him. For a moment, Dante forgot how to breathe. Elena, here, hurt, dying, and these children, her children, clinging to him. The resemblance punched him harder than any enemy ever had. Their eyes, her eyes. But the timing, 4 years, made something darker coil in him. He crouched to their level, his gloved hands trembling almost imperceptibly. "Where is she?" The twins pointed toward the glowing red sign, "Emergency Surgery." He stood, the world tilting under his feet. His empire felt suddenly fragile, a castle of glass hit by a single stone. Inside the operating room, Elena fought for her life, unaware that the man she once loved, the man she once trusted, was just steps away. Dante's mind raced. Why was she here? What happened to her? Who were these children? Why didn't she tell him? Pride had convinced him she didn't matter anymore. Pride had lied. As the storm outside cracked the sky open, Dante took a step toward the restricted hallway. The twins scrambled after him, one grabbing his hand with surprising certainty. "Don't leave us," she whispered. For the first time in years, Dante hesitated. For the first time in years, the world demanded more from him than power. And for the first time in years, he didn't know what the hell to do. He looked at the small hand gripping his, then at the surgery doors, then at the life he thought he had buried. Something was breaking, and this time he couldn't stop it. A nurse hurried past, her expression tight, and Dante caught the words on her clipboard. Critical blood loss, cardiac risk. His skin went cold. Elena was bleeding. Elena was dying. And he was standing here like a ghost haunting his own mistakes. He straightened, the old Dante snapping back into place, sharp, controlled, decisive. But beneath that iron certainty was panic, clawing at his ribs. He had spent years pretending he didn't care. But seeing her name on that chart shattered every lie he had fed himself. He needed answers. He turned to the twins. "What are your names?" "Aria," said the braver one. "Lila," whispered the other. Aria and Lila, Elena's daughters, maybe his daughters. The thought landed heavily, dangerous and impossible to ignore. "Who brought you here?" he asked. "No one," Aria said. "Mommy drove. Then she fell. Then she didn't get up." A punch to the gut. Elena had come alone. No partner, no family, no one but these children clinging to survival with tiny trembling hands. Dante felt something unfamiliar press into his throat. Responsibility. "We waited for help," Lila whispered, "but no one listened. Until you came." He wished she hadn't said that. He wished he could take a step back. But their belief in him wrapped around his ribs like chains. Before he could speak, a doctor burst through the surgery doors, face grim, calling out, "We need a guardian for consent, now!" Aria and Lila turned to Dante with one question in their eyes. "Will you save her?" And that was the crack. Wide, merciless, irreversible, splitting straight through the heart of Dante Moretti's golden life. He stepped forward, and the doctor looked up. "Sir," she said, urgency sharp in her voice, "are you family?" The word hit him like a bullet. Family. Dante opened his mouth to answer. The sound sliced through the hallway, merciless. Nurses sprinted, the twins cried out. Dante's pulse hammered as the doctor spun toward the chaos behind the doors. Something catastrophic was unfolding, now unstoppable. The lights flickered with the storm's roar as one brutal truth hit him. He might already be too late. The storm hammered against the hospital windows, each strike a reminder that the world outside was tearing itself open, while Dante Moretti stood frozen in a hallway he never expected to see again. Aria and Lila pressed close to his legs, their tiny bodies shaking with fear, their soft sniffles threading into the sterile silence. He hadn't realized until this moment how small children actually were, how breakable, how utterly dependent on the nearest anchor they could grasp. And somehow, impossibly, that anchor had become him. He didn't like the feeling. Dependence was a danger he didn't allow, not even from his own blood, if these children were indeed his. The thought was a blade in his mind. He forced it aside, locked it away. This was not the time to unravel. A Moretti didn't unravel. A Moretti commanded, controlled, conquered. But the control he prided himself on was slipping, like water through clenched fists. A nurse approached with a clipboard and the tense look of someone juggling too many emergencies. "Sir, we need a guardian authorized to approve blood transfusions and surgical intervention. The patient can't consent." She glanced at the twins. Her voice softened. "They said your family." Dante didn't move, didn't speak, didn't breathe. The word family was once a chain Elena had begged him to take seriously. He had refused. Now it hung around his neck like an accusation. "We don't have time," the nurse pressed when he stayed silent. Arya tugged his sleeve. "Please," she whispered. "Mommy needs you." Lila's small voice followed, trembling. "You're the only one who came." The truth hit him with merciless clarity. These children had no one else. Elena had kept her distance so thoroughly that even in a moment of crisis, there was nobody to call. No husband, no partner, no friend close enough to rush in. She had walked away from him and then walked away from the world, and he let her. His jaw locked. "I'll sign." The nurse handed him the clipboard. His gloved hand hovered over the line where a signature belonged. It felt symbolic, binding, as if writing his name here would stitch him back into a life he had abandoned with arrogant finality. He signed anyway. The nurse hurried toward the doors, but Dante remained in place, staring at the ink as though it could answer the question burning through him. Why didn't she tell him she had children? Why didn't she tell him they were possibly his? Did she think he wouldn't care? Or was she protecting them from the darkness that clung to him like a second skin? He didn't know which answer hurt more. A memory rose uninvited, a faint echo of Elena laughing in their kitchen, flower in her hair, sunlight on her skin. She had once told him she wanted a big family. He'd scoffed, told her he didn't have time for fatherhood, that children deserved better than a man with blood under his nails. She had looked at him then with a sadness he didn't understand until now. "Is Mommy going to die?" Lila whispered, breaking his thoughts. Dante knelt for once without thinking. "No," he said, voice low but steady. "She won't." It wasn't a promise. Dante never promised anything he couldn't guarantee, but the words slipped out before logic could stop them. The girls clung to them instantly, as though his voice alone could hold the world together. Arya frowned. "You look scared." Dante almost laughed. He hadn't been scared since boyhood. Fear was something he carved out of himself early, replaced with discipline and ruthlessness. But standing here with two trembling children who might carry his blood, fear crept into him like cold seeping through cracks. Before he could respond, heavy footsteps echoed down the hallway. Dante's instincts sharpened. Habit, reflex, hospitals were neutral grounds, but his enemies didn't always honor rules. He turned sharply, only to find Matteo Russo, one of his lieutenants, approaching. "Boss," Matteo said, lowering his voice when he spotted the twins. "They said you came here. Wasn't expecting—" His eyes flicked to the girls, then to the surgery doors. "This." Neither was I. Dante stood, mask snapping back over every exposed emotion. "Status on the warehouse?" "Handled, but the men are asking where you want bodies moved. They need orders." Of course they did. The world didn't stop bleeding just because he did. "Tell them to wait." Matteo blinked. "Boss, with all respect, waiting puts us at risk." Dante's gaze cut sharp. "Then they'll learn patience." Matteo swallowed, nodded once, and retreated. Dante didn't miss the confusion in the man's eyes. Dante Moretti never delayed decisions, never hesitated, never let personal matters interfere with business. But tonight, everything in him was shifting, tilting, cracking. "Is that your friend?" Arya asked. "No." Dante's answer was immediate, too immediate. The surgery doors opened. A doctor stepped out, pale and sweating, searching the hallway urgently. "Guardian for Elena Moretti?" Dante stepped forward before anyone else could. "We need more blood," the doctor said, "and we need to know if the father is available. Genetic matching could save time." Arya and Lila looked up at Dante with pure expectation. Children's certainty that the world makes sense, that adults tell the truth, that fathers step forward. Dante felt something twist inside him, violent and unfamiliar. The doctor cut him off with a raised hand. "If he's not here, we'll proceed with standard protocol." "But we're running out of time." Then she disappeared back behind the doors without waiting for his answer. Dante stood rooted in place, breath shallow, heartbeat heavy. The word father echoed around him like a verdict waiting to be spoken. If Elena had hidden this from him, there had to be a reason he was terrified to discover. Arya tugged his coat again, her eyes red and swollen but fierce. "Are you our daddy?" Lila pressed into his side, silent, trembling, afraid of the answer. Dante Moretti, who had stared down death more times than he could count, felt his throat close. He opened his mouth. But before he could answer, an alarm shrieked through the hallway, sharp and violent. A nurse burst from the surgical doors shouting for crash carts. The twins screamed, and Dante's blood ran cold. Elena's heart had stopped. The alarm scream cut through the hallway like a blade, sharp enough to flay every carefully constructed layer of Dante Moretti's composure. He had heard monitors flatline before, too many times, in too many places. But never like this. Not when the body behind the door belonged to the only woman who had ever seen the soft places he kept barricaded behind iron and pride. Arya and Lila clung to him, their tiny hands digging into the expensive fabric of his coat. Their cries were small, broken things, sounds meant for a mother's comforting arms, not the cold chest of a man built from violence. Dante didn't look away from the glowing red surgery sign, even as chaos swarmed the corridor. Nurses rushed forward. A crash cart clattered. The doctor's voice barked orders sharp enough to slice the air. "V-fib! Charging to 200!" Dante's jaw locked so tightly it hurt. Elena's heart, her stubborn, hopeful, infuriating heart, had always been too soft for the world she lived in. The irony that it might stop now after everything she had survived was almost unbearable. "Is Mommy dying?" Lila whispered, voice trembling so hard the words barely formed. Dante lowered himself slowly, like a man descending into a battlefield he couldn't control. He placed one hand on each girl's trembling shoulders. His gloves felt too cold against their warm skin. "She's fighting," he said. "She always fights." It was the closest he could come to a promise without lying. But inside him, something old and vicious prowled. Fear, the emotion he had killed in himself years ago. Fear of loss, fear of guilt. Fear that he had spent 4 years pretending Elena didn't matter, only to discover she was the only thing that ever had. The monitors behind the door spiked again. The alarm cut off. Silence fell, heavy and suffocating. Arya hiccuped. Lila buried her face against his knee. Dante remained still, waiting, listening, bracing. Then a voice shouted from inside, "We got a pulse!" Relief crashed through the hallway like a wave. The twins sobbed in unison, collapsing into each other. Dante exhaled through clenched teeth, a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. For a moment, just a moment, he allowed himself to feel it. Hope. It burned, unfamiliar and dangerous. Inside the operating room, Elena drifted in and out of consciousness, trapped between the bright pain of the present and the shadows of memories she had fought to bury. She saw the twins first, 2 crying angels reaching for her. Then the face she had spent 4 years trying to forget. Dante. His eyes had always been the anchor she both needed and feared. In the haze of pain, she could almost see him standing over her, jaw tight, gaze fierce, torn between fury and longing. "You're not here," she whispered in the darkness. "You can't be." But the memory wouldn't fade. It clung to her like the scent of his cologne, dark citrus, smoke, danger. Her heart stuttered again. Elena forced herself to fight the pull of unconsciousness. She thought of Arya's stubborn bravery, of Lila's quiet strength. She thought of the years she spent guarding them from the world Dante ruled like a king made of knives. She had left him because she refused to raise children in blood and shadows. She hadn't expected to face death without warning. She hadn't expected her body to fail. She hadn't expected the past to come crashing back with surgical lights burning above her. Elena tried to lift a hand, to call out, to ask if the girls were safe, but her body wouldn't obey. Darkness swept over her again, cold and merciless. This time she didn't know if she would make it back. Dante paced the hallway like a caged animal. Matteo returned, saying nothing, wisely keeping his distance while watching the twins with something close to sympathy. "Boss," Matteo said quietly, "the men need answers. You're disappearing from the radar at a bad time." Dante didn't look at him. "Handle it." "Handle what? You know how the Russians are." "I said handle it," Dante repeated, voice quiet but lethal. Matteo shut up immediately, but then his eyes shifted to the twins, then the surgery doors. "Are they yours?" Dante's muscles tightened. "I don't know." Matteo hesitated. "Do you want them to be?" Dante didn't answer. He had been a husband once, but never a father. He had kept Elena at arm's length, convinced emotional closeness was a liability a man in his world could not afford. Children? That had felt like madness. Now, staring at the twins' tear-streaked faces, he felt the ground shift beneath him. The idea that they might be his was unbearable. The idea that they might not be was worse. A nurse approached. "Sir, the girls need to be questioned about emergency contacts. Their mother's phone is locked and we can't find any family files." Aria straightened, wiping her cheeks. "We don't have anyone." Dante felt the words like bruises on his ribs. "No friends?" The nurse pressed gently. Lila shook her head. "No grandparents?" "No," Aria whispered. "It's always just us and Mommy." Dante closed his eyes briefly. Elena had chosen complete isolation. Why? To protect the girls from him? From his enemies? From a life she knew would swallow them whole? The nurse turned to Dante. "Then until we identify a legal guardian, they need temporary supervision. Are you willing to stay with them?" Aria and Lila immediately grabbed onto him like lifelines. Matteo raised an eyebrow. Dante stared at the nurse. Staying meant involvement. Involvement meant unraveling every barrier he had built since Elena walked away. "Yes," he said. Aria sighed with shaky relief. Lila hugged his leg again. Matteo muttered something in Italian under his breath. Shock or disbelief, Dante couldn't tell. The nurse nodded. "We'll need paperwork." Of course they would. Dante Moretti signing hospital guardianship documents. The irony was almost absurd, but he followed her toward the desk. Halfway there, the hallway went silent. Every head lifted, every body froze. A surgeon stepped out from the OR, her expression drawn tight. Aria's fingers dug into Dante's hand. The surgeon scanned the room and locked onto him. "Mr. Moretti," she said, "we need to talk privately." Dante's throat thickened. Aria whimpered. "Tell us." The surgeon hesitated, then her voice dropped to a grave, devastating softness. "It's about Elena." The world tilted. The room blurred. The surgeon opened her mouth. She didn't wake up. The surgeon's words hung in the air like the final toll of a funeral bell. She didn't wake up. Not dead, not gone, but not here. Suspended in the fragile space between life and oblivion. Dante felt Aria's grip tighten until her fingernails dug into his skin through the glove. Lila's small body trembled against his leg. The corridor, already cold, seemed to drop several degrees as the sterile lights flickered overhead. "What does that mean?" Aria demanded, her voice shaking with a courage she didn't understand. "When is she waking up?" The surgeon hesitated. Too long. Dante recognized that pause. He'd seen it in interrogation rooms, in back alleys, in the eyes of men who were about to deliver a truth sharp enough to wound. "Your mother is stable," the surgeon began carefully, "but she's unresponsive. The trauma to her body and the prolonged blood loss." She sighed. "Her system shut down to protect itself. We call it a comatose state." Coma. The word struck with the force of a bullet. Lila's knees buckled. Dante caught her before she hit the floor, his arm wrapping instinctively around her small frame. Her tears soaked into his coat, forming a warmth he didn't know how to respond to. "Will she wake up or not?" Arya insisted, voice cracking on the last word. The surgeon looked at Dante instead of the children, a choice he noticed immediately. "We need to discuss the next steps, privately." Arya stepped in front of him, her tiny palms balled into fists. "No secrets. She's our mommy." The surgeon knelt to look the girls at eye level. "I promise nothing is being kept from you, but some decisions have to be made by adults. Your guardian," she added, glancing at Dante with measured caution, "will decide what happens next." Dante heard the unspoken question. "Are you that man?" He didn't answer. He couldn't. Not yet. He didn't know what the truth was. But he had willingly signed his name once tonight. And everything since had spiraled into a reality he couldn't have imagined even hours ago. Mateo stepped closer. "Boss," he murmured. "The kids." "Handle the hallway," Dante said. "Nobody comes near the OR or these girls." Mateo nodded and moved away, posting their men at the corridor's ends. Hospital security glanced nervously at the sudden appearance of tailored suits and cold stares, but no one dared approach. Dante's presence had always been a warning to the world. Stay back or suffer consequences. The surgeon motioned for him to follow her around the corner. The twins clung to him immediately. "No," Arya cried, "don't leave us." Dante knelt again. The motion felt almost practiced now, though he would never admit that. He placed a hand on each girl's shoulder. "I'll be right here," he said. "I won't go far." "Promise?" Lila whispered. He didn't make promises. Ever. Promises were weapons people used to bleed each other with. But the way she looked at him, like he was the last pillar holding up her collapsing world, forced something raw out of him. "Yes," he said quietly. "I promise." Only then did they let him stand and follow the surgeon. They entered a dim consultation room, frosted glass, a faint hum of fluorescent lights, and on the table, Elena's chart. Her name printed in black ink felt like a punch to the ribs. The surgeon folded her hands. "Mr. Moretti, before we discuss medical options, I need to ask something critical." He said nothing. "How closely related are you to the patient?" His jaw tensed. "We were married." The surgeon blinked, surprised. "And the girls?" He stayed silent. She studied him carefully, professionally, but she wasn't stupid. "Do you believe they're your children?" Believe, not know. That distinction landed painfully. "I don't have proof," he said, voice low. "She left without explanation. No contact." The surgeon exhaled. "Then here's the problem. Without a confirmed legal relationship, you are not automatically authorized to make long-term medical decisions for her." Dante's blood went cold. "Short-term stabilization, yes," she continued, "but Elena's condition may require extended intervention. We need a designated guardian. If she remains unresponsive, someone will have to sign off on her treatment plan, potential surgical options, and—" She stopped. "And?" Dante pressed, voice like steel sliding out of a sheath. "And end-of-life decisions." The world stilled. All the noise from the hallway ceased. His heartbeat roared like thunder in his ears. He stared at the surgeon with a calm so absolute it was dangerous. "No one," he said slowly, "will make decisions about Elena's life except me." The surgeon didn't flinch. "Then you will need proof of paternity or legal documentation connecting you to the children." Paternity. The word carved itself under his ribs. "DNA testing takes time," the surgeon continued. "We don't have a confirmed emergency contact or next of kin. If no legal guardian is found—" Her voice softened. "Child Protective Services will intervene." Dante's eyes darkened to the color of a death sentence. "They will take Arya and Lila," she said gently. until a guardian can be assigned. The temperature in the room shifted, sharp, icy, lethal. Dante Moretti had killed for less provocation than this. His voice dropped to a low, controlled threat he didn't bother disguising. "No one," he said, "is taking those girls." The surgeon swallowed. "Then you must establish guardianship immediately." He stared her down. "What do you need?" "Documentation, proof, anything that ties you to them." She hesitated. "Do you have access to the mother's belongings? Her phone? Her bag?" He shook his head. "And the children?" she asked. "Do they know anything? Names of relatives? Addresses?" He knew the answer before he spoke it. "They said they have no one." The surgeon's expression softened, not with pity, but with dread. "Then we need to find something. Otherwise, there will be legal escalation." Dante's pulse thrummed with cold fury. Elena had cut ties so completely that even in her unconscious state, the world was ready to dismantle the fragile life she had built. "Why didn't you tell me, Elena? Why did you do this alone?" The surgeon rose. "I'll give you a moment. But understand, your claim over the children is not recognized yet. And if we cannot identify another legal guardian, the system will step in by morning." She left the room. Dante stood there, fists clenched, breathing like a man standing at the edge of a cliff. He had built an empire that bowed to him, but he couldn't stop a hospital from taking the only family he might ever have. He stepped into the hallway. Arya and Lila looked up instantly, hope flaring in their eyes despite the terror. "Is Mommy okay?" Arya asked. "Can we see her?" Lila whispered. He didn't answer those questions. Instead, he knelt between them, lowering himself into their small, trembling world. "Girls," he said softly, "I need you to tell me something. Anyone your mother ever mentioned, anyone she trusted, anyone we can call." They shook their heads. "Mommy always said we only need her," Arya murmured. "And that the world isn't safe," Lila added. "She said people would take us away." Dante felt the ground tilt again. Elena had been protecting them. From him? From his enemies? From her past? From the darkness she thought he couldn't leave behind? His voice dropped to a dangerous, quiet certainty. "No one," he said, "will be taking you." Arya nodded, relieved. Lila rested her forehead against his shoulder. For the first time in years, Dante felt the weight of a responsibility far greater than any power or empire. He stood. Matteo approached cautiously. "Boss, something you need to see." Dante followed him to the end of the hallway, where a nurse stood holding a small, clear evidence bag. Inside it, a shattered phone, blood smeared on the screen. And the lock screen image, Elena, holding 2 newborn babies, and a man's hand on her shoulder. Not Dante's, not even close. The nurse swallowed. "We found this in her car. There was an accident." Matteo glanced at Dante. "Boss," he said quietly, "that's not your hand." The world ripped open. Dante realizes Elena may not have left him for safety. She may have left him for someone else. Dante Moretti stared at the shattered phone like it had struck him physically. The screen glared back with a truth he hadn't prepared for. Elena's hand holding newborns, a man's hand on her shoulder, and not his. Every muscle in his body went taut. Pride, fury, disbelief. They collided in a storm he had long mastered to control, but now couldn't. The twins clung to his legs, sensing tension, but not understanding it. Arya's bold little hand tugged at his coat. "Boss." "What is it?" she asked, voice trembling. Lila's small fingers gripped the fabric too, her eyes wide, shining with fear. Dante took a breath, slow and controlled, forcing himself to separate the storm raging inside from the children in front of him. The thought that Elena had someone else who shared her world with these girls. It was a poison that tasted like betrayal. But he couldn't act yet. Not here, not with them watching, expecting answers he didn't have. Mateo leaned in. "Boss, we need a plan. Hospital security, CPS. They'll move fast if there's no legal guardian. Do we contest it?" Dante's eyes narrowed. "No, not yet. Not with that image sitting in my hands. Let them think what they want. Let them act. I'll deal with it on my terms." Mateo blinked. He had expected rage, action, commands. Instead, Dante Moretti, the man who killed without hesitation, was hesitating. Not because he was weak, but because he was wounded in a place he had forgotten existed. Pride, the one trait that defined him, screamed to protect Elena's honor, but it was tangled in anger and suspicion. "Boss," Mateo said cautiously, "we need to secure the girls. If anything happens to them—" "I know," Dante interrupted, voice cold. "No one touches them." The twins watched silently, trusting him, desperate for guidance. They didn't know the danger, the darkness of the city, the enemies that waited like vultures, nor did they know the weight of secrets between adults. They only knew that this man, Dante Moretti, was all they had right now. For a fleeting moment, he considered leaving them with Mateo and rushing to find Elena himself. But pride, stubborn and cruel, anchored him. He couldn't run blindly into a situation he didn't control. Not now, not after 4 years of silence and deception. The hospital hallway was quiet for a heartbeat before chaos returned. A doctor's assistant approached, hurried steps betraying concern. "Sir," she said, voice urgent, "we need to proceed with care. Time is critical. Your your patient—" Dante's teeth clenched. The girls flinched. "I understand," he said. And he did, more than they could imagine. But he didn't act immediately. He needed proof first. He needed answers first. Because pride, the dangerous and brutal part of him, told him if he moved too soon, he would be admitting weakness. And weakness meant failure. He walked toward the elevator, leading the twins with him, Mateo trailing silently. Each step felt deliberate, a careful cadence meant to mask the tornado inside. He could feel Aria and Lila's eyes on him. Their trust was a fragile shield he didn't want to break. The elevator doors opened, and Dante stepped inside. The metallic clang felt like a death knell, a reminder that even in hospitals the world was moving relentlessly forward. Numbers flashed above the doors, floors ticking upward, and then the phone buzzed. Dante froze, not because of the sound, but because of the sender. It was an unknown number, blocked, anonymous. His instincts, sharp as ever, screamed caution. He could already feel the weight behind the message before he opened it. Mateo noticed. "Boss?" Dante ignored him and slid the screen open. Message. "If you want Elena alive, you'll come alone." The text left no sender, no trace. Only a time, 10 minutes. Dante's stomach clenched. This wasn't a threat. It wasn't a bluff. It was precision. Someone knew exactly where he was and exactly what would make him move. He looked at the twins. Aria's face was flushed with curiosity and worry. Lila's eyes were wide, silently asking him to promise something impossible. He didn't answer. Not yet. The elevator doors dinged open on the next floor. Dante stepped out, keeping the twins close. Every step was careful, measured. But the thought of going alone, leaving the children behind, gnawed at him. He could almost hear Elena's voice, faint and accusing. "You left me once, Dante. Don't leave them too." The twins' small hands tugged at his coat again. "Don't leave us," Aria whispered. Dante's chest tightened. His pride, his arrogance, his need to control everything, the part of him that defined him, screamed to walk away from the message, to ignore it, to focus solely on what he could see and touch. The girls, his responsibility in front of him. He almost did. Almost. But the clock ticked. And Dante Moretti, master of control, knew instinctively that some choices, once ignored, were irreversible. The message repeated. Another text. Same words. If you want Elena alive, you'll come alone. Dante crushed the phone in his hand, ignoring the surge of heat that spread through him. He didn't delete it, didn't call back. He didn't react. Pride demanded he wait, that someone else could be bluffing, manipulating, using fear to control him. The girls noticed his stillness. "Boss?" Lila asked quietly. "Everything's fine," he said, forcing a smile he didn't feel. "I'm here. That's all that matters." The nurse returned with forms for guardianship, expecting him to sign immediately. Dante waved her off. He wouldn't sign, not until he understood the full scope of this game, not until he knew who had reached into Elena's life while she lay vulnerable. For the first time in years, Dante Moretti hesitated. He refused to act. Pride whispered in his ear, "Do not bend. Do not allow fear to dictate your move." The twins, oblivious to the danger outside, trusted him completely, and in that moment he made his choice. He would protect them by ignoring the outside world, by refusing to follow the demand that might be their only chance of saving their mother. He didn't notice Matteo's sharp glance, or the subtle shift in the hospital atmosphere, the unspoken tension that hinted at forces moving beyond the sterile walls. He didn't realize the magnitude of his refusal, and he didn't notice that somewhere, someone watched every move, every pause, every heartbeat. Time was running out, and Elena's life, already hanging by the thinnest of threads, would not wait for Pride to finish speaking. The hospital alarms shriek, and in the ICU, Elena flatlines while Dante stubbornly refuses to follow the urgent message, his choice sealing a perilous, irreversible path. The alarm shrieked like a predator through the sterile corridors of St. Helena Hospital, a harsh wail that tore through Dante Moretti's carefully constructed calm. He had ignored the messages, refused the summons, convinced himself Pride was protection, and now he was being punished for it. Inside the ICU, Elena's body lay pale and motionless, the monitors beeping in a rhythm too slow to comfort anyone. Nurses' hands flew over IV lines and machines, voices overlapping in sharp urgency. But their urgency felt hollow because the clock of Dante's pride had ticked over into recklessness. Aria and Lila sat curled together on the waiting room bench, tiny forms trembling beneath his jacket. They had no idea how close they were to losing their mother, no idea that Dante's decision had just put the fragile thread holding their world together under threat. "Boss?" Matteo's voice broke through the chaos, low and tight. "We can't wait. You have to go now. "I know," Dante said, his jaw tight, fists clenched at his sides. "I know exactly what I'm doing." He didn't. Every instinct screamed at him to move, to act, to tear through the hospital corridors and force the truth from the doctors, from the world, from the hands that dared to intervene in the life of Elena Moretti. But pride, a brutal, unyielding prison, held him. He wouldn't let fear dictate his actions. He wouldn't let anyone tell him what to do. And yet his chest burned with a fear that wasn't pride. "Boss," Matteo stepped closer, his voice edged with desperation. "She flatlined. They can't. Before Matteo could finish, a doctor emerged, face pale, eyes sharp. "Mr. Moretti, she's critical. If you don't authorize immediate intervention, we will follow standard emergency protocols. Her chances decrease by the minute." Dante's hands clenched into fists, nails biting into his palms. His body felt foreign to him, tense, trembling, raw. He stared at the twins, trusting him blindly, and felt the crushing weight of responsibility for the first time in years. Aria whimpered, reaching for him. "Please, help her." Dante's throat tightened. He couldn't speak. His mind spun between fear and fury, regret and stubborn pride. Every year he had built walls around himself had been to avoid vulnerability. And now vulnerability had walked in, wearing the face of his daughters and the unconscious body of the woman he had loved and lost. The doctor grabbed him by the shoulder. "Sir, we need authorization now." Dante tore his gaze from the children. He wanted to scream. He wanted to storm into the room and break every rule in the hospital. But the phone messages lingered in his mind, the anonymous demands, "Come alone." He had refused, and now refusing meant watching the person he had abandoned for pride teeter on the edge of death. He started, but Matteo cut in sharply. "Boss, this isn't about pride. This is her life." The words struck him like bullets. He had spent decades controlling life and death, deciding the fates of men, enemies, allies, and subordinates alike. And here, in this fluorescent-lit hallway, he felt powerless. The irony gnawed at him like acid. He glanced at the twins. Aria's small face was pale, fear etched into every line. Lila's trembling hands clutched his coat, silent but pleading. Their trust in him made the air around him burn. He had promised protection, and he had refused action. Dante moved. Not fast enough, not yet decisive enough, but he moved. He stepped into the ICU hallway, flanked by Matteo, eyes scanning every door, every nurse, every machine. Machines beeped, alarms screamed, and the monitors above Elena's bed flashed erratic lines. Inside, Elena's body convulsed slightly, a feeble rebellion against unconsciousness, but not enough. The doctors and nurses worked desperately, voices overlapping, orders shouted, hands moving with precise urgency. Dante watched, a storm of guilt and fury raging inside. The world around him narrowed into the beeping of monitors. The cries of his daughters in the waiting room, the sterile scent of antiseptic, and the impossible need to save the one person who had ever forced him to feel without armor. Time slowed, each second dragging like iron chains through his chest. Every breath felt heavier, every heartbeat a hammer. He could see the life he had refused to acknowledge hanging by threads in the hands of strangers. Then the machine flatlined. "Flatline! She's—" a nurse screamed. "No!" Dante's roar shattered the sterile calm. He lunged forward, hands on the bed, gripping the side rails as if sheer will could pull her back from oblivion. His mind snapped into motion, calculating, commanding, orchestrating chaos like he had done 1,000 times before. But this was not his empire. This was not his men. And no gun could fix this. Aria and Lila's cries echoed through the hall, distant yet piercing, blending with alarms, with screams, with the storm outside rattling the windows. Dante's stomach twisted. He could feel every mistake, every moment of pride, every refusal pressing down on him with the weight of 1,000 bullets. "Boss, we can't." Matteo's voice was frantic. "I don't care," Dante snapped. "Do whatever it takes. Save her." And yet the world seemed to mock him. Elena's body lay limp, fragile. The monitors beeped flatly, rhythm gone. Doctors worked frantically, but he could feel the slippage, the impossibility of control. He had let this happen. He had refused the warning. He had refused to act. And now the life of the woman he once loved, the mother of his children, hung in immediate peril. Aria and Lila's cries were muffled by the chaos, but Dante could feel them through the floor, through the walls, through every bone in his body. He clenched his jaw, refusing to collapse, refusing to let the fear control him. But fear was already here. Fear had always been here, lurking beneath the surface, and now it was merciless, sharpening the pain of pride into an unbearable blade. Dante dropped to his knees beside the bed, pressing his hands against Elena's limp body, willing life into her with every ounce of the man he had become. He felt nothing but the pull of failure, of guilt, of a world he had ignored. And then a hand touched his shoulder, Matteo's grip firm but urgent. "Boss, there's a choice. They need you to authorize surgery, now." Dante's eyes snapped open. The choice was before him. The clock was merciless. Every second wasted was a second closer to losing her forever. He swallowed, forcing pride aside for the first time in years. "I'll sign," he said, voice low, but every word a declaration. Matteo nodded and moved. Dante's hands shook, but he stayed at the bedside, gripping Elena's hand through the thin hospital sheets. The monitors beeped in renewed life, the staff moving with renewed energy. But the storm outside, the world beyond, and the consequences of 4 years of silence had only begun. The door to the ICU burst open suddenly. A figure slipped in, shadowed by rain streaking the windows, face partially concealed, and Dante froze. Recognition, shock, and horror collided as he realized exactly who had orchestrated this, and exactly what they wanted. The figure steps fully into the room, revealing a face Dante knows, and the message becomes horrifyingly clear. Elena's life and the girls are now caught in a deadly game beyond even his control. Dante froze as the figure stepped fully into the ICU, the rain-streaked light revealing the face he had hoped never to see again. Sharp, calculating eyes, a smirk that had haunted his past. It was Lorenzo Vieri, the man whose name had once been whispered in both fear and contempt in the underworld Dante commanded. Lorenzo's presence here, now, at the edge of Elena's life, made Dante's blood run cold. The room seemed to narrow, the alarms and cries fading into a muffled hum as every instinct screamed warning. This was not coincidence. This was design. "Dante Moretti," Lorenzo said, voice smooth, dangerous. "I hoped I'd find you here, keeping the girls entertained while Mommy struggled." Dante's eyes darted to Elena's limp form. The monitors flickered, flatlined briefly, and a nurse shouted, fingers moving frantically across buttons. He wanted to kill Lorenzo here and now, but he knew better. Any rash move would cost Elena her life. "Why are you here?" Dante demanded, voice low but deadly. "What do you want?" Lorenzo smiled faintly. "I want what you've spent years avoiding. I want the truth. The world you left her to navigate alone. It was never safe, and now it's my turn to test you." Arya clutched Lila's hand, their small bodies trembling. They didn't know who Lorenzo was, didn't know the danger he represented, but Dante could feel the girl's fear seeping through the floor like poison, and it made his chest constrict. "You orchestrated this," Dante said, finally allowing the rage to edge his tone. "This hospital, these messages, everything. You endangered her deliberately." Lorenzo's eyes gleamed. "I didn't endanger her, Dante. I revealed what your absence created. 4 years of absence, and suddenly you're faced with consequences you cannot ignore. Pride kept you away. Now, pride is your enemy." Dante's hands clenched. Every muscle in his body screamed to strike, to tear Lorenzo apart, but the twins, Elena, the ICU staff, everything hung in a fragile balance. Acting without thought would destroy everything he had fought to preserve. He took a deep breath, forcing control over the storm of emotion. Then, slowly, his mind began to piece together Lorenzo's moves. The anonymous messages, the timed urgency, the car accident, the shredded phone. Every detail had been orchestrated to provoke him, to test him, to expose weakness in his empire of pride. "And Elena?" Dante asked, voice tight. "What did you do to her?" Lorenzo shrugged. "I didn't touch her, not physically, but I ensured she couldn't reach out. I ensured you would be tempted to ignore her cries, and now she lies there, waiting for you to choose." Dante's stomach twisted, waiting for him to choose. He had already hesitated. He had already refused, and now the consequences were real. Elena's life hung by threads, his children's trust perched on the edge of collapse, and the man before him was smiling. Arya and Lila clung to his legs, small bodies shaking. Dante bent down, lowering himself into the tiny, trembling world of his daughters. Girls, he said quietly, voice hoarse. "Stay calm. I promise you, I won't let anything happen." "Are you sure?" Arya asked, eyes wide and shining with fear. Dante hesitated. "I don't know if I'm sure," he thought, but he forced the words out. "I'm sure." The lie slipped out, bitter and raw, because certainty was impossible in a world Lorenzo controlled with cold precision. He stood, jaw tight, eyes narrowing on Lorenzo. "Why show yourself now?" he demanded. "Why not deal with me later, after I've lost everything?" Lorenzo stepped closer, voice low, deliberate. "Because you needed to understand the cost of absence. You needed to see the cracks your pride has left in her life, in the girls' lives. You've been living as if you were untouchable, Dante. But life is not obedient." Dante's mind raced. Every plan, every empire, every meticulously executed move in his life, it all felt suddenly fragile. This man, Lorenzo, had exposed it, and worse, he had weaponized it against the only part of Dante that mattered, Elena and their children. Then Dante's eyes fell on Elena. The monitors beeped erratically, hands moving frantically. He realized something he hadn't noticed in the chaos. The surgeons were improvising, balancing her fading vitals with desperate precision. Lorenzo's presence was a distraction. Every second he hesitated, every flicker of doubt could mean death. Dante moved. Every instinct, every ounce of control snapped into place. He approached the bed, brushing past Lorenzo with calculated precision, hands on Elena's frail body, voice low and commanding. "You do exactly what I say, now." The ICU staff froze, stunned by the sudden, absolute authority. Dante's presence, his command, filled the room, sharper and more lethal than any gun. Lorenzo's eyes flicked with recognition. The game had shifted. Dante didn't turn. His attention was on Elena. He checked the lines, the monitors, the machines. He spoke with precise authority, directing the nurses, correcting mistakes, demanding blood, oxygen and attention with exacting precision. Lorenzo watched, smirk fading into fascination, then respect. The man who had once ignored the consequences of absence now moved with lethal focus to reclaim what he had nearly lost. Arya and Lila pressed against his legs, silent now, eyes wide as they watched the chaos. Dante felt the weight of their trust, of their belief in him, and it burned into him with a clarity that was almost unbearable. And then, slowly, imperceptibly at first, Elena stirred. A hand twitched, a finger flexed, her eyes fluttered, heavy with pain and delirium. The monitors stabilized, beeping steadily, almost reluctantly acknowledging the return of life. Dante exhaled, relief sharp and raw. He didn't smile. He didn't allow himself that indulgence. He had learned over the years that triumph in the Mafia, in life, in love, was never absolute. But he allowed himself a moment, a brief, burning moment to acknowledge that he had won, this battle at least. Then Lorenzo stepped forward, voice low. "Congratulations, Dante, you saved her, but you still have much to lose." Dante's eyes locked on him. "I don't care what else you want. Elena lives, the girls live. That's all that matters." Lorenzo smiled faintly. "All that matters, for now. But do you understand what you've walked into? Do you understand the truth?" Dante's heart skipped. He had realized parts of it. Some, but not the whole. "What truth?" he demanded. Lorenzo stepped back, voice chillingly calm. "The man holding her hand in the hospital, the one she trusted before you walked away, he's not gone. And he isn't the only one watching. Your absence created more than grief. It created opportunity, and opportunity breeds predators." The room seemed to contract. Dante's stomach turned. His mind raced. Every step, every hesitation, every act of pride over the last 4 years had brought them here. The monitors beeped steadily, a fragile rhythm against the storm of realization. Dante's fingers tightened around Elena's hand. His voice dropped to a low, lethal whisper. "Then I'll face them. I'll fix it, whatever it takes." And he knew, in the core of his being, that the game had only begun. Dante realizes the full scope of the danger. Elena is alive, but their enemies are closing in, and he may be too late to protect her and the twins from the predators created by his absence. Rain streaked down the hospital windows like silver knives, hammering the glass as Dante Moretti stormed through the corridors. The storm outside mirrored the chaos inside, a tempest that had been building for 4 years, now breaking all at once. Aria and Leila were secured with Matteo at the waiting area, their small bodies trembling but safe for the moment. Their wide eyes followed him, silently urging him to hurry. Every heartbeat echoed like a drum, each step through the hospital a countdown. The ICU doors loomed ahead, sterile and unyielding. Beyond them lay Elena, fragile and pale, yet fighting, clinging to life with a stubbornness Dante recognized. But the moment was fleeting. Every second counted. Every moment of hesitation could turn the tide toward irreversible loss. Dante's hands shook, not from fear, but from the weight of everything he had refused to face. The cost of pride, the years of absence, the children who depended on him, and the woman who had once been the axis of his life. He flung the doors open. Alarms, monitors, and the flurry of medical staff assaulted him, but his gaze was locked on her. Elena lay unconscious, tubes and lines crisscrossing her body, yet for the first time there was rhythm in her monitors, life, fragile but unmistakable. "Clear!" Dante barked instinctively, directing the staff, voice sharp, precise, commanding. He didn't ask permission. He gave orders. Every hand moved under his guidance. Every decision was swift. Every heartbeat counted. And through it all, he felt the slow thawing of something long buried, something he had refused to acknowledge. Love. Elena's fingers twitched. A small groan escaped her lips. Dante's chest tightened. Relief, fear, hope, all collided in a dangerous, exhilarating storm. He kept his eyes locked on her, refusing to blink. Then, from the corner of his eye, he noticed Lorenzo, still there, still observing. A faint smirk crossed Lorenzo's face, but Dante ignored him. There was no time for games. Minutes stretched like hours. Dante's hands hovered over the monitors, ready to intervene, to command, to protect. And then she opened her eyes, blue-gray, weary, but alive. Recognition flared like fire. "Dante!" Her voice was weak, almost nothing, yet it shattered every wall he had built around his heart. He bent close. "I'm here," he whispered. "I'm not going anywhere." Tears pooled in her eyes, but this time they were not only pain. They were relief, trust, recognition, love that had survived absence and pride. Outside the ICU, Aria and Lila pressed their faces against the glass, watching, holding each other. Dante motioned to Matteo. "Bring them in!" The twins ran, small feet pounding on the floor, arms outstretched. Aria and Lila climbed onto Elena's bed, hugging her tightly. Dante knelt beside them, hands on their shoulders, watching the reunion with a fierce, quiet intensity. Elena's fingers brushed Dante's, lingering. Her eyes searched his, reading the lines of regret, pride, and love etched into his face. "You came," she whispered. "I always would," he replied, voice low, heavy with the weight of 4 years lost and a lifetime to rebuild. Lorenzo stepped back into the shadows. His game, his manipulation, had failed. Dante's reckoning had arrived not with guns or vengeance, but with unyielding presence, with choices made at the edge of pride and fear. Outside, the storm began to ease. Rain softened into a drizzle, light filtering through the clouds, a quiet promise of calm after chaos. Dante glanced down at the twins, then back at Elena. He saw the future, fragile and uncertain, yet possible. protection, loyalty, love. He would wield them as fiercely as he once wielded fear. Elena squeezed his hand. "We have a second chance," she said. Dante's jaw tightened. "We have everything we've lost, and we'll take it back together." The ICU was no longer just a room of crisis. It was a sanctuary rebuilt from the ruins of pride, absence, and fear. Dante held them all, feeling the weight of responsibility, and for the first time, he didn't shrink from it. Outside, the sun pierced through the clouds, warm rays cutting across the hospital parking lot. Life continued, brutal and beautiful. But for Dante, Elena, Arya, and Lila, it was more than survival. It was a reckoning, a rebirth. No more absence, no more refusal, no more games. Dante leaned close, voice barely above a whisper, almost a vow. "Nothing will ever take you from me again." Elena nodded, eyes glistening. The twins clung to both of them, laughter and sobs tangled together, innocent and unshakable. And Dante, for the first time in years, allowed himself to feel unguarded, not weak, but alive, whole, and ready to fight for what truly mattered. The storm had passed, but the darkness they had survived left a mark, a lesson burned into the core of their souls. Love, once lost, demanded courage, sacrifice, and a reckoning worth every moment. Dante looked at his daughters, then at Elena, then out the window. The city waited, dangerous as ever, but he had learned something vital. The fiercest power wasn't fear, weapons, or wealth. It was the willingness to be present, to act, to protect the ones who truly mattered. And in that quiet, powerful moment, Dante Moretti understood that he had reclaimed more than life. He had reclaimed them, all of them.